and I have talked about.
Yeah.
Ms. Lauren Hastings works for the Delta Stewardship Council Science Program.
I just
Dr.
wanted
Hastings.
to interject that in your draft Delta plan, you call for the Delta Science Program to develop landscape scale conceptual models to help inform the restoration of those 6 priority target restoration areas.
Those will be ready next week?
Well, as soon as Robin and Allison get their work done. But we've actually had some conversations with them because I think this group is already obviously thinking at the landscape scale. I hope they've at least given you a really strong inkling of the value of what they're doing. But we've been having conversations, just early conversations with them about, working with them to help us develop these landscape scale conceptual models that would both help inform the planning for restoration projects, the design of those projects, and also the metrics that Randy mentioned. I think there's just tremendous value in those types of models. What is possible? What are the scenarios? And then we have to overlay all of that with the reality of human beings being on the landscape too, and the values and economics associated with the humans, and do some balancing of that, as well as fact-checking with our current hydrodynamic models. Is it possible today? And how do all of these things interrelate? So I think it's great, the work that they've done, and we're hoping to partner with them on that.
Don?
I guess I'm just a bit curious then. Have you tracked some of the other work that has been done out there? There's been some, you talked about the levee areas, there's been some breaches and levees. I know on Bean Ranch, the Westervelt did a project last year just just north of Thornton there. So is that all kind of factored in where you are taking, you still have the farmability and maybe restoring some to a more permanent wetland scenario in the sense that you're not going to, but you'll still farm around it. Is that all being tracked? How current are you on in your studies as to some of the things that have occurred, say, in the last year, 2 or 3, or maybe you are, maybe right up to the very moment? I don't know. I'm curious about that.
Well, I can't claim to be on top of everything.
No, I don't mean that.
The Delta.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm talking about this area here.
The job now is we are recruiting lots of contemporary information through the team. I didn't show you the team of scientists that are sort of our extended group working on this project. So bringing in as much contemporary knowledge as we can about how the system is working today to inform this big picture development. That said, we are not in our job, I don't think, is to evaluate the different land management strategies and the economic side of that. That's kind of beyond our purview. But I think we are trying to learn as much as possible about what people are actually doing out there and how this fits.
My other question is, how do we get a copy of your report?
Oh, did you not get one?
No, there's an electronic copy.
Okay.
No, we actually got 3, and I stole one from the science program so I could review it. And there's a 4th.
I don't want to steal from the science program, so I'd like to get a copy if you have the paper.
We'll get you. I have 3 here, so
It is. By the way, I've read the executive summary plus the overview chapter, and then skimmed through the rest. The graphics are terrific. Not universally understandable, but really impressive graphics. To try to take a complex array of facts and circumstances and reduce them down to something that's usable and understandable. And I just commend you for that. And also, conceptually, I like the way you approach the issue, although you don't move fast enough to the, okay, we understand it, what do we do with what you've got stage. And it is that implementation stuff that is, for us in public policy, the most important. And to the extent it's possible, I suggest to you that if you wish to have your research have a meaningful impact on decisions that are made, you had best accelerate your next work product far faster than you ever expected. I can't guarantee it, but I think there is a decision point coming relatively soon. A composite of the Delta plan we're doing, the BDCP, the flow studies from the Water Board. You can just kind of feel the momentum pick up. But work in process that is unresolved, that can't be understood, digested, and translated into that public policy process, inevitably just kind of gets put aside, talk to us later, and you miss the impact. And I understand how complicated this is. But taking the McCormick example, you also mentioned cash slew. Don't go to any slides on cash slew. But I assume you have the same approach. The McCormick tract cash slew are parts of multiple agency studies of potential areas. It's not as if you have discovered something that no one has ever speculated about before. You've done something better than that. You've tried to take out of a conceptual idea and expand into opportunities that present themselves. The faster those opportunities comparable to this are made, the better the chance they will be incorporated in decisions. So, I mean, and I say this to scientists all the time, but public policy is long periods of inattention and inaction, punctuated by brief periods of hysteria and decisions. And it comes in no pattern, much like the weather. But when it comes, your ideas and programs are either on the shelf ready to be used or they're not. And the first person with a relatively clear, relatively understandable concept for an area where almost everyone has said, yeah, the potential is here, whatever the terms and conditions. I mean, the opportunity to translate this into operational information, and I don't mean a 1,000-page detailed program summary, but the next stage it's really important. Don't miss the opportunity. You will miss. That would be tragic to do something this good and not take the next step on a few selected areas, which are the areas we've all been talking about. Don.
Yeah, and run the risk of interrupting your ability to do your research and put your study together. I would certainly want to extend the invitation on behalf of the Delta Protection Commission to have you come and make a presentation maybe in the late winter, early spring. I even think the Delta Conservancy would benefit by having this, a presentation, because I think the information falls certainly within the realm of what the council is looking at and putting together a Delta plan. But I think it's relevant to. And I think it's something that folks at those levels, that the Commission as well as the Conservancy, with the various mix of folks that are represented there, would find this very, very interesting, and I think a good point of information for them. So, I appreciate your work. I'm just listening to your presentation has provoked a lot of thought in my mind about questions and so forth. I do seriously want to get a hard copy of your report whenever possible. Thanks.
Yeah, I think you too and your colleagues ought to be congratulated. Well conceived, well executed. My only suggestion is that you have slides that you pass that are universally legible. Are these on your website?
I feel bad. We will give a version to the science.
The electronic report
Yeah.
is posted publicly on your
Yes.
website and available. And
I'm thinking specifically about
the
these
slides will
Slides,
be
okay.
posted.
Yeah.
Yes, those will be posted.
well,
as
I
well.
think almost
They will be.
most of the slides are from the report itself.
Many of them
not
are,
the
or
transition
certain
slides
modified
and the summary
versions.
stuff. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah. Okay.
Today.
By the way, I thought the
When
other.
will it be? I think it's a few days, a couple days.
I thought one of the more helpful tools was what you call the consolidated summary points, which are they're much more detailed parts of it, but it's a way of stating a conclusion from the evidence they've developed, and that conclusion then leads to policy understandings that are useful. It's about a 5 or 6 page listing that I thought was very impressive, very useful in terms of format. Okay.
I do have
Gloria.
a question, yeah. I wanted to, Lauren, would you please stay here? I have a question, actually, and thank you again for your report. It was really interesting, but I have a question again about the modeling, and I think Robin talked about at some point your study would reflect a model that will say this is a particular area that should be considered for restoration. Is that correct? Just trying to understand what the model will actually do, because I'm really trying to figure out. I know the Delta plan, in fact, I asked Martha, the plan kind of reflects kind of a broad approach to which area we should consider for restoration. And your report is more detailed in terms of some of the impacts based on historical data. So is it possible to get a modeling that shows, to take in what is currently going on, the things that are working, and the detail that you have and what the Delta Science Board has and put together and say this is a template for an area, but of course, it will be impacted by human, as you indicated, but something that really reflects a criteria for this is an area that we really should consider when doing projects with ecosystem restoration. Is that possible to get something like that? Anyone?
I think that's what everyone is trying to head towards, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it will happen. There's no 100% answer, right? We'll get better understanding, and that will inform our conceptual models, and then we'll do more modeling, and that'll adapt it. But yes, that's exactly where I think everyone's trying to head as fast as possible.
How far out is that?
Probably depends on the place and quite what level. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to the modeling, and you guys are having whole workshops on the different aspects of that. So I don't know that there's a simple answer to when. It's a process,
right?
Getting better and better understanding, and I think that's happening every day, really.
Your second report that you referred to, I think you said it was about a year out.
I think one of the with this new opportunity, with this new project, I mean, we're already as Robin mentioned, we're already in conversation with people who are actively planning, in Prospect Island and various different locations in the Delta that are already out there trying to create plans. And so by being in conversation with them, we might not have, a report or our finished conceptual models for them, but just by interacting with them, we can bring these concepts more to play and actually start developing. That'll lead us to what that larger vision.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that a lot of these areas, I mean, McCormick-Williamson Tract has been owned for 12, 15 years, or so. It's been a long time, and there's been planning being done on it for a long time. And same with Prospect Island and a lot of these other priority restoration areas. It's just that they haven't yet been able to break ground. So I think one of the challenges that we have is how to not just stop the current planning efforts, wait for what they've got, but yet incorporate some of the aspects of what they're learning to not preclude future opportunities is kind of the way I'm seeing it. So, for example, on the McCormick-Williamson Tract, I don't know what the Nature Conservancy is thinking now with what you've just given them. I mean, this is hot off the press stuff on that, and they've already got a design, I think.
If
For
it's not
McCormick-Williamson
inelegant, the
Tract.
Nature Conservancy is hot to trot. They want to move.
But they want to move. So,
Yeah.
but it might be that they could do a slight tweak to their current design that would allow for
Other-
potential that would
Right.
really augment what they've already got
Randy.
going.
Right.
One of my biggest criticisms of the way we utilize science in the Delta is that we develop a project or a program, and engineers and those people associated with that particular project do all their work, and then they bring it to the Delta Science Program for review. Well, your job at that point is to be critical and look for areas that they didn't think of or may not work in terms of how you view the world. We need to get the Delta Science Program involved at the beginning when we're defining the problem. And this may be a good place
Right.
to start.
Exactly.
And I would strongly urge you to insert yourselves into this process. You've got a willing participant, landowner. They own the land. They got it from the state. And hold a workshop and talk about what it is that what is the problem, and how are we going to address it. And it would be a great place to talk about modeling, conceptual models, and if it takes 2 days to cover this, and I think it would be a valuable experience. Get the science program involved at the beginning, not at the end.
I'll go further, and I think you ought to agree that within the next 60 days, you, the Institute, probably the Nature Conservancy, maybe other governmental agencies are going to hold a 2-day modeling workshop. And you're going to take this very rough, very preliminary time frame model for McCormick-Williamson and refine it and discuss it. I think And if there is any utility that comes from that, it would be to further amplify an idea that's already vaguely on everybody's mind, but give some structure to it. So the thing I liked about your approach on McCormick is you speculated over time on what elements might look like. And my experience is that we are hesitant to get involved in that speculation. We seek consensus before speculation, knowing very well there's no consensus on anything about the Delta, anywhere, anytime, because somebody's always going to object to something. But from the scientific community, if you can't take the general understanding on McCormick-Williamson that's out there and help refine what the Institute has done, I mean, hell, we don't belong in the business if we couldn't do that. And the need for speed is obvious, because if it works, then you ought to take a look at Cache Slough or Cache Creek. And just, is there a way of going to the 2 or 3 or 5 things that all fall within the areas we've identified in the Delta Plan, most of which are part of the BDCP speculation process, if not actually part of it for mitigation yet, that have been part of the Department of Fish and Game or Department of Fish and Wildlife's ecosystem identification. I mean, it's all there. It's an open invitation to do it fast. And the grim folks at the Independent Science Board, Doctor, are sitting out there who've agreed by his presence for this discussion to actually participate in the damn thing, because they have a role to play that's really important on this stuff. It's a notion of, if we move fast, we can push the issue ahead. If we wait for somebody else to move, your next report's going to take a year, which will turn into 18 months, and everybody will move on to something. I mean, the opportunity's there. I think it's a big opportunity. I like the concept of modeling as a word to use for a public session, because that sounds ominously serious to a bunch of scientists, and I'd like to have you guys focused on a serious discussion. Fast.
Well, I very much appreciate your input.
Thank you.
And
Actually, could I just add